Welcome to MGoRadio 10.11.
Yeah.
We are going to preview the Ohio State game. I know most people are probably going to be like, talk about Xavier, except some of you are weird. It's always a very strange thing.
Yeah, I don't know. For some people, the Michigan-Ohio State game is a big deal. Probably because we won the last 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Would have won it the 4th time, too. So this is that 2020 game that we never got to see, right?
No, because Dan Villari would have won.
Right. Well, David Gorn is going to win.
Start off with the Ohio State offense. The equation has changed a little bit. Will Howard has come in. He's not going to be a first-round pick and has no aspirations of being a first-round pick in the NFL draft. They brought in Chip Kelly to be the offensive coordinator. They've improved, I think, their consistency on the ground. They don't have as much explosion in that department as they had a year ago. So they lead the Big Ten in 10-yard rushes, but they're middle of the pack at every other length of generosity. And they've been extremely consistent against most Big Ten teams, where they'll get like 35 carries for 170 yards. The two exceptions were that Indiana was able to slow them down a bit, and they put up a real clunker against Nebraska. Now, Alex, I know that you've watched various games that Ohio State has played. Was there anything special that the Cornhuskers were doing to get those results?
Not necessarily. I just think Nebraska's got a really good defensive line. I mean, or at least a pretty darn good one. We've seen them over the years. We've got our old friend Nash Hutmacher, the the old wrestler guy. You think about Indiana last week. They had C.J. West, the nose tackle that we really liked. Those are two of the better defensive lines that they played. And the biggest story, too, to talk about with that Indiana game is that the full season rushing stats and pass protection stats for Ohio State aren't that useful because the picture has changed dramatically on their offensive line compared to what they wanted it to be, compared to what it was in September. They lost their left tackle, Josh Simmons, who was the San Diego State transfer that we kind of dunked on back when they got him in the portal, but he developed really nicely, was really getting on some NFL draft radars. They put in Zen Michalski in his place. Then he got injured. Now they're playing Donovan Jackson, the left guard, at left tackle. You can look at the PFF grades. They changed very dramatically when he started playing out of position, and that's an area of concern. And then you lose your center, Seth McLaughlin, plug in Carson Hinsman there. That brings Austin Seerveld off the bench to play at guard. So it's a reduced unit, and going up against good defensive line, or at least one with strong defensive tackle play in Indiana, was a bit of an issue. And I think projecting to this week against Michigan, who do have a really good defensive line, that's going to be an area of concern. Like, I think it's perfectly possible that Ohio State will rip off one long chunk. They did that against Oregon, where they got a 50-some yard run from Travion, and outside of that weren't too effective down to down. I think it could end up looking like that. It's not the picture they wanted it to be in the trenches.
Yeah, so I mean, the standout item from Donovan Jackson at left tackles, he put up the patented 0.0 against Penn State, according to Pro Football Focus, charged with 5 pressures, 2 of them sacks in that game. And, Michigan has a couple of guys on the edge who have been excellent pass rushers this year, particularly Josiah Stewart. And so, Ohio State's favored by 20 in this game. So really the questions that we're asking is like, what is the path to victory for Michigan? And it does feel like on both the ground, both against the run and against the pass, is it kind of has to feel like Michigan is playing that USC team again, where Miller Moss came into that game looking like he was like a really good quarterback, and he left that game just battered, just couldn't drop back to save his life without getting harassed by several different Michigan defenders. And if you are looking for like the silver lining, the changes on the offensive line for Ohio State, their general lack of ability in this kind of reconfigured situation, I mean, that's the avenue, right?
Yeah, you got to overwhelm them, because that's really a strength on weakness matchup, because Michigan's defensive line is the strength of the defense. We know that. We know that the secondary a little more questionable. And on the flip side, Ohio State still has really talented skill position players. So you got to win where you have the matchup advantage. And that's definitely the matchup advantage for Michigan. You look at that Penn State game. Penn State has Abdul Carter as an edge rusher, projected in the first round, some cases very high in the first round. And it wasn't a competitive matchup between him and Donovan Jackson. And even given that Josh Fryer is fine, but not like great at right tackle either. And so you look at this line, and I don't know if they have a single truly plus run blocker on this line. And even among pass protection, it's not great, individual piece wise. Like, you had your 2 strongest pieces both go down, and now you're left with this 5-man unit that seems pretty mid. And I think they can get by against not as good teams up front, but Michigan is still possibly one of the very best defensive lines in the country. And so that could end up being a real problem for them that gets Ohio State in a bit of a slog if they're giving up sacks. They're not able to run the ball at all, and they're constantly being behind the sticks.
That's another thing that kind of popped out when I started looking at the Pro Football Focus grades, is that Jackson didn't just drop off as a pass protector after he moved outside, but his 4 games at left tackle, he's put up 55, 49, 61, and 50 as his grades, and the average at Pro Football Focus is 60. So he's downgraded considerably in both phases.
Well, he's not just playing left tackle. He's not playing next to Seth McLaughlin anymore either. And I know Carson Hinsman, was fine as a center for a starter last year, but they were, as far as their run game, that's what they brought him in for. They're like, Seth McLaughlin is going to turn us into a run game because they had a bunch of Ohio State guys who couldn't, get a first down on 4th and 1. So the interesting thing about this team is they brought in Chip Kelly, and you're like, okay, they got Will Howard, who's ran a lot for Kansas State. They're gonna install all this stuff. They're gonna use Quinton Judkins and Trevion Henderson as inside-outside guys. They had the pieces, I thought, to make themselves a Chip Kelly offense that just burns you with Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Buka at the end, and they kind of don't play that way. They kind of play just like a regular Ryan Day team. I don't know, Alex, if you noticed that the strategy seemed particularly different than everything we've seen from Day up till now.
Not really, but I also don't know to what degree they kind of aborted their plan once the OL started falling apart, right? Like, this is when you bring in a new OC, you want to see that sort of improvement as the new system gets installed by the end of the year. And then starting in mid-October, they had to really start going with a patchwork line. So I'm not sure to what degree that changed things. The Howard part is notable. We saw them do the switcheroo in the offseason. They shipped Kyle McCord to Syracuse. They bring in Will Howard. It was kind of like, what's the point of making this big dramatic change if you're not getting an obvious upgrade? Well, it wasn't necessarily an upgrade, but it is a different situation. And the biggest area is the rushing game. We weren't that concerned about Kyle McCord rushing at all going into the Ohio State game last year. Will Howard's going to run some, and he does give them the ability to extend some plays when pass protection breaks down in a way that McCord wasn't going to be able to. And so you kind of go back in time. It is a bit prophetic that they made the move to a quarterback more mobile and then immediately had their OL fall apart in this season, because that's going to be very, very useful for them, not just in this game, but the rest of the way, because it's going to be needed when they go up against better defensive lines.
Well, and one thing that jumps out is that, Howard comes over from Kansas State after putting up 430 yards last year as a rusher. And most of those were designed. He only had 7 scrambles versus about 60 called runs. And called runs for Will Howard this year are like 2 a game. So that is something that I don't expect to continue against Michigan, right? Because this is, if you remember 3 years ago in 2021, like CJ Stroud just wouldn't run the ball. And then suddenly against Georgia, he picked up, 50, 60 rushing yards in that game. And their offense looked a lot different, and they almost beat that Georgia team that was just a wrecker. So from my perspective, this is you can throw out the record books as far as it goes with Will Howard runs. He's gonna have the ball 6, 8, maybe even 10 times, and Michigan has to be prepared to deal with that. I think they will be, but it is going to be an extra thing that they have to have on their plate.
Yeah, I think they just haven't had to bring out the Will Howard run as much. They're a really good team. They got a great defense. They're generally in command of these games, but you go to that Penn State game, and they did run him a little bit more in that game. They went to it twice late in the game when it was time to ice the game. Adding Howard in as a rusher gives you those advantages. And they ran a play earlier in that game where he's running to the sideline and he's got Judkins as a lead blocker. I liked that idea. We could end up seeing something of that nature as well. And again, the scrambling will be useful. So that's absolutely something that has to be talked about going into this matchup, because otherwise, it's pretty similar to Ohio State team. Like, we remember Emeka Egbuka, remember Trevion Henderson. They added in Judkins, who's a good running back, a lot of power and strength to his game. They bring in Jeremiah Smith, who most people probably know about. Hyped up young receiver, pretty good player. So otherwise, we're familiar with these weapons, but the Howard mobility is probably the biggest change with the offense compared to last year, other than the general offensive line troubles.
Yeah, and so from a Michigan defense perspective, a lot of their advantage goes out the window once they have to bring in the backup defensive line. So early in this game, I'm going to be looking for, can they pull the Texas on us where it's like, okay, we're out here for 15 plays, and then Michigan goes 3 and out, and they're out there for another 12 plays, and all of a sudden the best defensive line in the Michigan in America is sending out like Trey Pierce and TJ Guy, they're okay players, but they're not on another level from the offensive line of Ohio State. And so, like, to me, Michigan's offense staying on the field, which is usually something I'm pretty dismissive of, seems absolutely critical. And just not having those third and long issues that they've had for most of the year will also be extremely important.
I mean, this is going to be either we want to kill Wink or we're just going to be okay with him, because if he starts doing the crazy stuff, the things that they do get from Chip Kelly that you've seen, they run a lot of split flow. They like to just hit guys underneath on the sidelines and then trust their receivers to make some athletic plays. The Chip Kelly offense always just has options, right? Like it's a kind of a John Beeline approach to like if then. There's always a way to get out of whatever's coming at you. So if Wink is going to get weird, it's probably going to backfire in ways that it didn't backfire necessarily as much against Ryan Day. And I think that's what I'm trying to imagine. What's Ohio State's thinking, right? Because they brought in these guys thinking, how are we going to beat Michigan? That's the assignments, right? There's no doubt what Chip Kelly's job is to do. It's trying to figure out a way to deal with what Michigan has been doing to them for the last three games. So my guess is it's probably going to be, all right, Wink, bring it, and then we'll adjust to whatever you bring and just dump it down and have Judkins get a couple extra yards because he's Judkins, or, get a one-on-one with Jarrett Smith and one of the cornerbacks because, Amir Hall's going to have to play against these guys. Will Johnson's out. It's just like how much weirdness is it going to be versus like how much can you adjust to the reality of what Ohio State is this year?
Well, and also, like, you're like, we're playing Ohio State. This is going to be pretty bad. But just in terms of, like, what's happened when they've gone up against actually good defenses, like, they got something like 20 points against Nebraska, 21 against Penn State. Like, if Michigan's offense can be semi-functional and not set Ohio State up with excellent field position and just kind of lose the game that way, it feels like that's well within reach of this defense. Like, you gotta like expect that they're going to win on the offensive line a lot. You gotta hope that they're able to hold up against Jeremiah Smith to the point where he's not putting up 200 yards. But given what we've seen from this defense and other defenses across the country, like, I'm not going into this expecting that it's going to be a 50 burger for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, this should be, I think, probably the lowest scoring edition of the Ohio State games since that 2016 one, more than likely. If Michigan does what it can do, I think they can absolutely slow this Ohio State offense down. And then the other side of the ball, which we'll get to in the next segment, doesn't project you super high scoring either. So this could end up being a bit of a slog if Michigan does perform as we expect and present those matchup challenges that we've seen with Ohio State against a number of opponents this year.
All right, well, let's get to that side of the ball. We'll take a break, come back, talk about the Michigan offense, unfortunately.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. If you find yourself wondering if you're on the right track for retirement, reach out to us at peakwm.com/mgoblog for a second opinion. I've been sponsoring these guys for years. People keep telling me that my voice is pretty boring, and you've been fast-forwarding through my ads. Well, yeah, I'm the guy you trust for your retirement planning and investing. It's not like I'm Gus Johnson or anything. And I really like spreadsheets, okay? It's not like I just sit here and look at your finances and be like, Donovan Edwards, the pistol back.
McCarthy to throw it. McCarthy looking, throws deep, got a wide open receiver. Cornelius Johnson sprinting, touchdown Michigan. 75 yards. They They said the kid couldn't throw the deep ball.
I'm going to play a bunch of clips like this all year, so now you can stop fast forwarding through my ads, okay?
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better. Need help with insurance? Well, longtime MGoBlog supporter Owen Rosen is back at his new insurance brokerage, Royal Oath Insurance Group. Owen might not be the knowledge, but he and his team have the life, business, car, and home insurance knowledge you need. Based in Michigan, but they can also help in other states too, you can call or text Owen today at 586-229-1026 or visit Royal Oath, that's O-A-T-H, insurance.com.
You can tell if it's on the creek. Saw you at the show getting hyphy. Yup, and I like your Nikes. Question, how often do you just do it? Tell the truth, I won't judge you if it's nightly. Two people looking for the same thing. You know, maybe you should try.
Welcome back to MGoRadio
You can do
10.11.
whatever if
We
there's
turn
no
our
clean.
attention to the Ohio State defense now. But first, we would like to thank Underground Printing. Rishi and Ryan have been our biggest supporters since Seth and I were as young as Alex. Literally.
Yeah.
You're up at UGPMichiganApparel.com or check out our selection on the MGoBlogstore.com, which will have our book for sale shortly. We also like to thank our associate sponsors, Peak Wealth Management, Realtor and Lender, Matt Demarest, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Champion Circle, Royal Oath Insurance Group, Michigan Law Grad, Winewood Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Community Pest Solutions, the Autograph app, Venue by 4M, where we record on Sundays, and Signal Wire, where we do this now. So, the Ohio State defense will be very familiar to anyone who has watched Ohio State over the past several years.
Yeah.
They got everybody back. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams. I mean, everybody on this team was there last year.
Ty
except for
Hamilton,
Lathan.
Sonny Styles, Jordan Hancock, Lathan
Yeah, it's just
Ransom,
the same team.
Denzel Burke, David Igbenosian. Yeah, they
I mean,
added
it's
Caleb
so
Downs.
Yeah, they had Caleb Downs, and then Ransom's been playing really well. You look at this defense, and it's really, really good. But then you look at the schedule, and you're like, because they played the Oops All MAC preseason. Their conference schedule has they're coming off games against like Purdue and Northwestern before Indiana, and their run defense looks utterly dominant in most games. But then you get to Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon, and I forget the other one. But the 5 games they've played against half decent opponents, they've given up about 4 and change yards per carry. Indiana is the best in there, where they really shut down Indiana. But the rest of those 4 games, they look a little bit permeable.
Yeah, I mean, that Indiana game, the big story there was Indiana's OL just couldn't hold up against Ohio State. Just from a talent standpoint, they were totally overwhelmed. So that is what it is. I do think from what I've seen that if you get some lighter boxes and it's a 4-man front with 1 or 2 linebackers there is the possibility to run the ball on these guys. I just don't know how relevant that is for Michigan, because I think their approach is going to be one that will key in on the run very aggressively. They will blitz a lot, and they will see if Michigan can do anything about it. So when you look at the Oregon game, I do think this defense can get cracked by a top-tier contender. Oregon put up a lot of points on them. They put up a lot of yards on them. I think the defensive line is pretty good. I think it's probably not truly elite. There's a lot of talent, but in the pass rushing sense, there's some possibility there. But again, when we're just analyzing this for Michigan, they've got to find some ways to stop Ohio State from just sending everything at the run game.
Well, yeah, that was the next thing I was going to say, is that those teams generally have functional passing attacks, and Michigan does not really. And so if Jim Knowles wants to reprise his 2022 game plan, that'll probably work out just fine for them, because Michigan had 3 40-yard passing touchdowns in that game. This year they have no 40-yard passes, period. So it might not matter, because if you're able to do what Michigan State did and just send safeties, play quarters with impunity, and just fill any gap that you happen to have with a member of the secondary, then yeah, Michigan is going to get stopped. The one thing I would say is that, like, if they do go with Khalil Mullings, that might be an extra yard or 2 or yard or 3 after every run, get them in some of those reasonable third downs that they might be able to convert, stay on the field a little bit longer, prevent that defensive line from getting tired out. I swear, like, if Donovan Edwards is out there for the entirety of Michigan's first drive, I'm just going to be like, what are we doing? No offense to Donovan Edwards, but
I mean, we've seen Donovan Edwards literally in that stadium win this game. Because,
well, yeah, but that's a totally different situation than they'll be facing on Saturday, right? Because Donovan Edwards was the capper on that. Like, he was not heavily involved in Michigan's successes before that, in part because of the aggression of that defense.
He had a broken hand, and he wasn't able to do anything at the beginning of the game.
Well, he could carry the ball, but he wasn't effective at doing that until Michigan had to force them to actually back off. So it just doesn't feel like, if Ohio State is going to be sending guys down the pipe really aggressively, that Donovan Edwards is the right response, especially because as a pass protector, Mullings is miles ahead.
Yeah.
So if you want to run play action off that stuff, you're already going to have trouble blocking these guys. Having an issue where your running back who's aborting the handoff to come and block a blitzer, like downgrading from Mullings to Edwards, seems pretty stiff to me. But, the nominal good news is that Tuimoloau has just not developed at all. He's just the same guy he's always been. He's never going to develop a pass move. His win rate is still under 10%. Sawyer's at 19. Sawyer's a legit threat. And I feel like Michigan might be able to get away with just chipping whoever's over Link and dropping back. And they don't get a ton of organic pass rush from that front. And then they do have no holes in their secondary, right? They have a couple of corners who aren't great, but they're fine. They're probably good enough to deal with whatever Michigan throws at them. And then their safety unit has been fantastic all year, Alex.
They definitely have been. And that's what's kind of a little frustrating about analyzing this for me, is that I'm sitting here and thinking, as a CFP contender, how would you attack? And what I think is interesting to attack just doesn't feel super replicable for Michigan, because I think you'd want to attack the corners potentially. Just first of all, throwing at Igbinosun is a quick gateway to the all DPI offense.
Absolutely.
He's good for
he's the grabbiest guy I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's good for 1 or 2 of those every week. And Denzel Burke's kind of had this up and down career where he's had some better years and some worse years. This has not been one of his best. He got torched over the top a few times by Oregon. But again, Michigan doesn't have Evan Stewart. They don't have Tez Johnson. They don't have Dylan Gabriel. And that's kind of the problem with that. But the safeties are really good. And when you look at the offensive or the defensive line, as you mentioned, the pass rush, I don't necessarily think is that great. JTT, I continue to see in the first round because of his measurables and things like that, and in that Lions range. And I'm always like, no, thank you. No way am I interested in spending a first rounder on this guy. Sawyer, I think, is interesting, but the big change for them really, to me, is last year they had Michael Hall Jr. at defensive tackle, who was a really good pass rusher. He had some issues in the run game, but he had a giddy up, and he had the lone sack that Michigan gave up last year in the game where he whipped Zach Zinner and then flushed JJ into Sawyer for the sack. They lose him, and the remaining defensive tackles, Hamilton and Williams, just aren't there yet as pass rushers and just haven't developed into that. JTT isn't there. So I think 4-man rushes, there's a possibility you could pick those up. But I expect him to blitz a lot to make up for that, because I watched that Nebraska game, and it's a trend I've seen with Knowles going back to last year at Penn State when Aller wasn't succeeding very much, is that when they don't really feel like they respect your quarterback, they just come after you, play after play after play after play. Indiana was totally unprepared to pick those blitzes up, and Michigan's going to have some answers.
Yeah, and their second best rusher after Sawyer is Cody Simon, who's a linebacker who they send like 5 or 6 times a game. And as you mentioned, they're probably going to ramp that up. They're going to crowd the line of scrimmage, dare Michigan to beat them over the top. And like the one kind of solution I can hypothetically see is just punting the ball up to Colston level and then seeing what happens.
Is he even going to play? I mean, he's another guy who's been injured, and they were talking like he went out for the second half of the last game, and they were talking like, we're hoping he's going to be available to play. But, I would not put it over 50% that he's even playable this game.
Well, we'll see. But like, if he's not available, I'm kind of like, well, but if he is, it's like maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is a thing I noticed: quarterback mobility can be very useful in this game, and that's where we haven't seen a lot of mobility from Davis Warren. But if there was ever a game for him to show us that he can run more than he has this year, this would be the game, because Nebraska was able to move the ball some through Raiola scrambling the ball. Aller had some rushing moments, and if they're coming after you from the run game, this would be a game where taking it on the run would be very useful. So I don't have the highest optimism, but that is something I have noticed, because like you go to that Oregon game, Oregon was able to protect Gabriel really well with when Ohio State rushed 4. But if Ohio State's blitzing, and even then if Link is in trouble, having a quarterback who can step up and get you 10 or 15 yards on the ground, as Raiola was able to, very useful in this game.
Yeah, and Michigan hasn't emphasized that, but always the first time for everything, and that's the other X factor, is that this is the game. So in terms of July drives, there will be a couple. There will be some trick plays that Michigan has in their bag that haven't been shown yet, and that might be able to prop Michigan up for a little bit, especially because they coming off a bye week and then Northwestern, and they kind of put the Spurs to Northwestern, so they probably didn't have to dig real deep in that game. So that's one thing that might be a little bit of a leveling factor.
Yeah, I think this is a big game for the coaching staff, honestly, even though there will probably be some staff changes in the offseason, and this has been kind of a lost year. But I think overall, from an offensive standpoint, Michigan's success in this game will probably be strongly correlated with how good of a game plan they come up with, because from a talent standpoint, they're just definitely not there. They don't have the horses to just kind of do their base stuff, because Ohio State's defense is way more talented than Michigan's. But if they have a good game plan, maybe they can cook some things up. We saw Harbaugh have some great offensive game plans in 17 and in 19, and Michigan had opportunities to make those games close and frisky. And even just for Sharon, and from a motivational standpoint, we can say a lot of mean things about the coach that Brady Hoke was at Michigan, but his teams got up for the game. They always did. I mean, 2013, they were, I think, a 16-point underdog, and that one came down to the wire. They were a 20-point underdog in 14, and that game was tied in the late third quarter before Ohio State pulled away. So I'm very curious to see if Sharon can get his guys up for this one, have a good game plan, and make it interesting for a little while.
Yeah, and in terms of special teams, there's not a whole lot. Caleb Downs had a punt return touchdown last week, but other than that, there hasn't really been a whole lot to talk about, in part because they just don't use their specialists.
Right.
Like their field goal kicker has 9 attempts on the year. Their punter has 29 attempts on the year. Like they seem fine, but if it comes down to a 50-plus yard field goal kickoff, Michigan's in good shape. It won't, but there's not a whole lot to talk about in that department. All right, predictions, Alex.
I think it could be a low-scoring game. Maybe Michigan has something cooked up, but I'll go with 20-10.
Okay, Ohio State, I presume.
Yes.
Fielding. Seth.
Wow, I don't want.
Igor Yost.
I don't want to break that one down. Yeah, I'm thinking like 23-12. It feels kind of like the like some games we played with in the past where Michigan can keep up with even a really good offense defensively, and they do, and then it just eventually it falls over, right? Like 2007 game where you just have Henny's arm or it's just broken, right? Or 2014 where Michigan is making it work, but there's just nothing left to Devin Gardner. Feels like one of those games.
Yeah, I'm a little more pessimistic because I feel like they'll hold up pretty well for a while, and then the overall ineptitude of the offense will just kind of weigh down on the defense. You get to those backup defensive linemen, your advantage goes away, and then it's just you get dunked on a little bit. So I think it's going to be like 32-16 kind of score where it's like not that competitive, but feels like it for a half maybe.
So you're more 2017 than 2007 on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. That unpleasantness behind us. Let's take a break, come back, and talk about a blowout in basketball.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood, certified financial planner and founder of peakwm.com/MGoBlog. If you're wondering where you stand relative to your retirement goals, keep us in mind. Can we help you retire with peak confidence? Yes. Can they catch him?
Again, 85 yards.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with SignalWire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. SignalWire is optimized for high-quality and low-latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
SignalWire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenient stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back, like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to Those Who Stay, UofM.com. Again, that is Those Who Stay, UofM.com to support. Go Blue.
It's the time of year where cracks in your defense get exposed. Good thing to fix is a phone call away. Community Pest Solutions is a lockdown defender for homes and businesses. If you're hearing noises in your walls or attic or dealing with bug problems, it's time to call Community. To schedule an inspection, just Google Community Pest Solutions or hit up their website at pestfreemi.com.
Stand behind. If a tree falls in the forest, it's gonna make a sound, but you're not gonna hear it because you're not online to find it. I'm reminded.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.11. Thanks to Tree City for the interstitial music. They have given us an advanced copy of their new album, Pure Levels, which comes out December 13th. Turning our attention now to the hardwood, Michigan wins the Fort Myers tip-off with a couple of wins against Virginia Tech and Xavier. Virginia Tech is not a very good team, and that was obvious as Michigan played Virginia Tech. Xavier got absolutely clonked by Michigan, but this was a team that had some expectations going into the year after finishing, 500-ish a year ago, but they hit the portal pretty hard and came out with, a good win against South Carolina. They beat the Wake Forest team that beat Michigan. And so it's kind of unknown how good this Xavier team actually is. But what is known is that Michigan actually absolutely pounded them defensively. So they shoot 34% from 2, 38% from 3. They only get to the line 9 times. They turn the ball over 19 times. And kind of the remarkable thing about this game is that, Xavier puts up 53 points in a 70-some possession game, and it felt like so many of their points were absolute horse shit.
like 25 points of those, like half of those points are like they get to the end of the shot clock and they jack up a 3 and it goes in, and they get a bank shot, they get a bank 3, they have a couple guys just go to the rim at the very end and throw something up off his butt and it goes in. It's like there were so many shots at the end of the shot clock. That's why it felt like that. And that is how you talk about, I think that is the entry to start to talk about this game, because the defense was just fantastic. And I thought it might happen when I was previewing this team, because they're a 5-out team. And the question is, when you play a 5-out team, is can your 5 stick on the court? Because if they can, then you just have that size advantage. Then you can go down low and everything bends your way. If they're out athleting and you can't get out there, then you're in trouble. And Michigan was able to switch right with them, and it worked. And it was like, whoa. I mean, Vlad Golden was able to handle it. Wolf was absolutely able to handle Fremantle, who was his main assignment. And it's like, okay, those are supposedly pretty top athletes. Like, we've seen Fremantle. I don't know how well he's come back from his injury, but like, if that's plausible, that is something.
Well, they still mostly drop with Golden.
Yeah.
So that is expected. But what they are able to do is they're able to switch Will Cheddar. They're able to switch, Sam Walters. And it didn't hurt anything. I think part of it is just that those guys are relatively big, so they can give up more room and still contest shots. But the thing is that, let's go back to the previous game, the Virginia Tech game. So Michigan does not play well for large chunks of this game. And it seems like all but like 1 or 2 of their first 20 shots are okay threes at best, and sometimes not very good threes. And they still just put the clamps on Virginia Tech. They shoot 39% from 2, 24% from 3. And the only reason that they're even in the ballpark of a point per possession, which they don't get to, is that they go to the line over and over and over again for dubious reasons. And they also have 19 turnovers. So, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the year, where they have some long guys, they have some depth at guard. They can really get after it on the perimeter. But what we're kind of uncertain about is like, well, what happens when they go after the 4s? What happens, when someone is able to exploit Danny Wolf and get to the bucket? And that's not happening. I actually left Danny Wolf off that list of guys who you can switch, because I can't remember him getting beat on a straight line drive more than maybe once or twice this year. And yeah, we haven't faced like a real serious 4 who's going to exploit that yet. But also it just kind of feels like, if that matchup happens, they'll just change the rotation a little bit and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So, and one thing that really jumps out is they help and recover in really intelligent ways. So if someone is in the area and they just think, okay, well, I can dig on this guy a little bit, they do. Like, everybody is hyper aware of where the ball is and where their man is at all times. And so you see these like brief little doubles that get guys to pick up their dribble and just interfere with the flow of the offense, but don't really expose you to a whole lot of quality like looks from 3. And they look so much better than any Michigan defense has since, I think, the Charles Matthews years. That, I mean, I, I want someone to ask in a press conference, like, how much of this defensive philosophy is coming from you, and how much of it is Boynton?
Yeah.
Because he's a switch everything guy. Like, Dusty wants to switch everything, which I love with this roster. Because, you switch from Gale to Donaldson. Congratulations, he's an inch shorter. Well done.
Yeah.
In exchange for just basically never having to worry about screens, it's a tremendous upgrade. So it feels now like that's this team's identity. That's something that we know about them, that they're a good defensive team. They're 7th in KenPom, and that still has some preseason baked in there. I think they could legitimately have a top 5 defense over the course of the season. And then offensively, you've seen them dial back the turnovers a little bit. And you talk about depth. And when you talk about depth, one of the things that you like about it is that, like, if some guy has an off night, you're not dead in the water. And I think these 2 games are an excellent example of that. So against Virginia Tech, Michigan rides Roddy Gale. Roddy Gale puts up 20 points. He has 4 assists. He's spectacularly efficient, 124 O rating on almost 30% usage. And then against Xavier, Roddy Gale puts up 6 points on 63 O rating. And it's like, whatever, we're going to activate Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf puts up the same stat line as Gale from the previous game. I'm sorry, I have a child. Someone else talk.
Well, so a couple of things.
Hey, Rosemary?
Yeah, defensively, you got Reuben Jones and Damari Burnett out there also just absolutely denying the best shooters for all the other teams. So, that was the story I thought against Xavier, is they have one of the better, pull-up shooters, and that was where a lot of their points come from. And he wasn't even getting the ball. Like, they had Namari on him, and as soon as Namari needs to take a breath, like, Reuben Jones denies him the ball. And then offensively, they are finally starting to see it. And Matt D put a thing together based off the TCU and Virginia Tech games. I don't think he had the Xavier tape yet. Showing you how, like, what systems they're using and, like, what they're doing. And when they see it, it's just a work of art. But when they don't see it, which has been happening a lot. So there's just so much upside to this offense. But they don't see it, they still have the ball in someone's hands who can go and do something. So, when you talk about Roddy Gale and Danny Wolf, both those guys are people who can create something on their own. And the more that it gets pushed to the system and the more they're enveloping everybody else, this offense could actually be super, super efficient. But they've established a floor. And that floor is, Roddy Gale goes to the basket, and when he's not on, Danny Wolf can shoot over somebody, or just he can pass the ball to anybody because he's just so much taller than anyone else who's guarding him out there.
Yeah, and the other thing that was important about the Xavier game is that Vladislav Golden finally got involved. So 18 points, 24% usage, and Michigan was intentional about getting him the ball on the block. So you saw various actions where they'd get a screener and they'd pull a guy up, and then they would reverse the ball specifically to enter to Golden. And people have been saying, like, Golden's not demanding the ball. Golden's not, getting where he needs to be. He's not demanding his usage. And I'm not really sure I agreed with that, because it kind of felt like they didn't have a good plan to enter the basketball when he had good position. And against Xavier, it finally felt like there were a number of ways that they wanted to enter the ball. And that paid off. Golden is 6 of 8 from 2, and one of his misses is another 0-footer, which we still have to work on, Vlad. Let's hit the easiest shots in basketball. I guess he did hit a 3, so I can't be too mad. But.
That was the first 3 in his life.
Yeah.
He said.
There's still, like, there are so many times where he goes up and just, like, dunk that, and he just puts it off the back, and some of those miss. And I want to start an NIL fund that pays him $1,000 per dunk, and then takes away $100 every time he doesn't dunk and misses one at the rim.
All right, well, we'll have to run that by Vlad. Another kind of development is that, Justin Pippen got 2 minutes in this game. Fat got 2 minutes. It kind of feels like we have the rotation now where you're going to get Cheddar and Walters off the bench at the 4 and a little bit of the 5. And then Jones and Kason are going to be your main backups 1 through 3. Cheddar had a very good garbage man junk pail game. He had 3 offensive rebounds, 3 assists, had a steal, almost got in a fight. Like he was almost like a Gordie Howe hat trick kind of night for him. And his improved defensive agility is apparent. He is no longer a pylon, and I'm not going to say he's the best defender in the world, but I'm just shocked that he's able to stay in front of guys after some real issues with that his first couple of years. So that offseason transformation where he lost about 30 pounds really paying off. And then I think the guy that we haven't talked about yet, who's been quietly one of Michigan's most important players, is Trey Donaldson. So it's kind of gotten to the point where when Trey's not on the court, I'm a little nervous. And he had some unfortunate occurrences in this game where he was trying to go too fast and wasn't super efficient early, but he finishes with 13 points, and that's on 13 shooting possessions. He's 1 of 4 from the line. That's not going to recur. 3 assists, 1 turnover. The one kind of thing that I was a little bit, annoyed at in this game was the fact that they were killing Xavier in the half court, just killing him. And there were a number of possessions where they're like, okay, we got to go fast, and they turn the ball over or they'd miss it such that Xavier could get a transition opportunity. And it just felt like that was, and their offense was composed largely of crazy jacks that went in and then transition that Michigan didn't have to give up. And I understand that Michigan wants to play fast, but I also kind of feel like there are certain situations where you got to kind of understand the game you're in.
Right.
And against a team like Xavier that really wants to go fast and is good at going fast and was just dying in the half court, I kind of felt like I wanted, unless it was really obvious, just pull the ball out, run your offense. They can't handle you. And I think they'll probably talk about that. And there's going to be, they want to be up tempo, but there's going to be situations where they have just this overwhelming size that they're going to want to exploit. And, because Golden was pulling on his jersey before the first commercial break in this game. And he ended up having a great game, but he only got 20 minutes. Part of that was foul trouble. But, I just feel like you need to have, the ability to pull off the accelerator a little bit.
Oh yeah, I wonder if Boynton kind of walked over to Dusty at one point and was like, "Dude, you're breaking my shutout." Like this is, it was a, it's not a situation I think that they've necessarily been in yet, but as they develop a team identity, and Donaldson is certainly the core of that. Like, what's your identity going to be? Because he is a guy who took a lot of pull-ups at Auburn and liked to play fast at Auburn, but he is a fantastic defender. And I think we've vastly underrated how good of a defender he was, probably because of the way Auburn played last year, but it is very apparent in this season.
Well, and that's one thing that all of these guys brought, right? Like, you bring in Reuben Jones and you're like, oh yeah, he's a really good defender first and foremost. But both Donaldson and Gale are also plus defenders.
And Namari.
And well, Namari wasn't a guy who they brought in from the
right,
portal.
but I'm saying he's a guy who we kept, and we were kind of wondering if he was going to be in a backbencher, like, is he just kind of a relic? And the fact that he's been a humongous part of their defense, and he's playing over Jones this year, and he's playing as well as Jones. Like that's not defense that I've seen from him before. I know it was in his profile because he played at Texas Tech and whatnot, but it's really coming out.
Yeah, so Michigan now feels like a team that should expect to make the tournament. I think we've cleared that gap where it's like we don't really know what to expect from this team. Now I think you can expect that this is going to be a very good defense, and if they can get the turnovers under control, they're going to be a very good offense. The only problem is that the next game is at the Troll Center.
Oh, God, what a way to start the Big Ten season.
Wisconsin and John Tonji, who you may remember from the Colorado State game 2 years ago. He was a decent player then. He's playing out of his mind right now.
Yeah.
So this is an excellent test for the Michigan defense because he's getting the line a ton, and he is not really like he doesn't have a whole lot of help. Like Crowell's a decent guy, like Klesmit can shoot from the outside, but in terms of generating shots, Wisconsin's heavily dependent on him. Like he's top 10 in the KenPom Player of the Year rankings right now. So this will be an interesting test, and I'll be fascinated to see what happens when Dusty May hits the Troll Center for the first time. Will he crack?
Do you think Dusty May is going to start swinging? I mean, if he does, it's definitely something with that.
Not swinging. I don't mean
if Dusty
swinging.
May starts a dust up, then we've really got problems in the Troll Center.
I just mean, will he look angry? Just even once, just a little upset. Just will he be like, ugh, and just kind of grimace? That's cracking for Dusty May.
Okay,
he's got to be the calmest basketball coach I've ever seen. So. We're going to take a break, come back, and we know what you want. We're going to talk some Bryce Underwood, some recruiting, set the table for the portal.
Hi, this is Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. You've probably noticed that we are terrible about keeping our podcast advertisements up to date and topical to Michigan sports, probably because we're so busy doing preventative maintenance for all of our many happy customers. We know no one is excited to call their HVAC contractor, and to make that a rare occurrence, you should regularly maintenance your system. Call us or text us to find out more about the benefits of our preventative maintenance plans, including savings on service calls and priority scheduling. Whatever the season, we want you to be comfortable for that next glorious Michigan victory.
1 and 2 and...
If you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, you want a Michigan man in the huddle. Call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul at 248-924-9458 or visit his website at michiganlawgrad.com. John is a proud graduate of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business and Michigan Law School, and he looks forward to showing you the Michigan difference.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing homes simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
Frustrated with your current e-commerce agency? Then it's time to meet Human Element, a digital marketing and web development agency with 20 years of experience building B2B and B2C websites. See us as an extension of your team, accessible, responsive, and strategic. We work with you to understand your goals so that we can build something that drives revenue and delights your customers. So if you're looking for an agency that acts as a true partner in your e-commerce business, visit human-element.com/partner. We can't wait to work with you.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives die-hard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
Raspberry bomb. Raspberry bomb. Raspberry bomb. Hourglass
hourglass silhouette with the long hair. Fear is the mind killer. Been looking for adventure since I saw my babysitter in a lawn chair. Put my toys down and hit
Welcome back
her
to
with the
MGoRadio
long stare.
10.11. We finish our podcast by going back to recruiting. Brady Hart, our 2026 quarterback recruit, is no longer our 2026 quarterback recruit.
Or
He is
anyone's
reclassified.
2026.
He was 26. He's
No,
now
he's-
25, and
yeah.
he flipped to A&M. So that's probably going to be difficult to keep a guy in the class immediately after Bryce Underwood, but Bryce Underwood. Speaking of Bryce Underwood, I want to talk a little bit about what I've seen watching his tape. His tape is really interesting because you see guys who have like a huge arm, and that's all you see. And every throw is on a rope. Joe Milton against Minnesota, just that.
Yeah.
Where everything is the same throw. And Bryce Underwood is interesting because you can watch him throw the ball several times, and you're just like, well, where's the arm strength? And then it's like, oh. And that's because he has just this natural ability to throw the ball with different arm angles and with different velocities. So his release gets shortened up if he's not throwing it way down the field because he doesn't have to have a full windup. So he gets the ball out quicker, and it looks weird. And you're like, I don't know about this. And then it's like, well, that screen got out there really quick. So hooray. And there's RPOs that he has on which he's throwing it sidearm, or he just has that kind of Mahomesian ability to use different arm angles based on what's appropriate. That to me is really encouraging. And the other thing that really jumped out is that, I was listening to people talk about Underwood and Bud Elliott, who works for 24/7. He was like, this guy's the closest guy to Cam Newton since Cam Newton. I was like, what?
That's
because I hadn't looked at Underwood because I just don't, if there's like the number one recruit in the country and Michigan's like, well, maybe we'll get him. I don't look at that guy's film until Michigan actually gets him.
Oh, yeah.
So I was under the impression that he was a relatively statuesque pocket passer. No, he is not. He is 6'4", 6'5", 220 pounds, probably going to fill out to 230, 240. And he moves in a way that reminds me of Vince Young or Cam Newton. And he was Belleville's leading rusher this year. He's huge, so he is able to power through tackles. He's able to dodge tackles, and he has separation speed once he gets in the open field. That combination of a guy who you have to respect as a runner and who has every throw in the arsenal and can throw it 50 yards on a line is impossible to deal with if that guy actually gets actualized. And we know this because we see this happen in college. Lamar Jackson, Young,
Gardner.
I mean, yeah. It's just, when that guy gets locked in, it's just an impossible thing for opposing defenses to cover all of it. And that's why he's the number one recruit in the country. Now, there are downsides. Primarily, he's young, and he hasn't been relentlessly drilled in everything you need to do to be a quarterback since he was 8 years old. But part of that is because he became the starting quarterback at 14 at Belleville. So, he's a guy who has even more upside than you would expect from just watching his tape, because he is in that Karras category of guys who should improve rapidly.
Yeah.
Even from a really high starting point. So, I put together a list of the top 50 quarterbacks in the history of college football recruiting since 2000, according to 24/7. He's 22nd on that list. And I think that list is a little bit goofy, just in the because DJU's ranked above him, but there was one service when DJU was a recruit who ranked him 43rd in the country, and Bryce's rankings are 1, 1, 1, and 2. So there's no reason that he should be behind that guy.
Well, isn't it based on 24/7's own rankings? That isn't
No.
that list isn't the composite, I'm pretty sure.
It is the composite because 24/7 didn't exist in 2014 or 2020 or 2010.
They
so they have
started
guys
in
going
2010, but they only had 50 guys that year.
Well, but in any case, that it is a composite list. You can tell, but there's some strange things on it as well. Like the number 6 quarterback this year is on the list, but 2 through 5 aren't. In any case, it felt like Bryce himself was underrated, and it felt like I went over all these quarterbacks, and there were some busts, but they were primarily before 2006. So the recruiting industry has gotten better at this, and the area where Bryce Underwood is, a guy's probably 50-50 to be a Heisman finalist. And that might be a little bit underrating it. So I'm highly encouraged. You don't really go into scouting the number 1 quarterback in the country and think, well, I'll probably be disappointed by this. But even in that context, I was like, giggity.
Yeah.
All right, Seth, you put up a post about Michigan coming down the home stretch as we near the fall signing day, winter signing day. What recruitments should people be up on?
Yeah, so we had a couple guys were playing defense on. I think those have mostly solidified. Andrew Marsh was taking a look at Washington. Then he came back to Michigan. I think the question was, will he come back and visit Michigan again this last week or go and visit someone else? And he visited Michigan from Northwestern. So I think that one's pretty solid. Andrew Olesh is still a bit of a question. That's the tight end that Michigan absolutely adores. He's a Penn State legacy, and Penn State's been pushing very hard for him. The Underwood commitment probably brought him back into 75% sticking with Michigan, but he still got another trip to Oregon. Everyone's negative recruiting against Michigan, and they've had to undo some of that. We lost a couple guys. Ivan Taylor went to Alabama. He was we flipped him from Notre Dame, and then he was I think 3 weeks later he was taking a visit somewhere else, so that one was not that surprising. We also lost Jalen Williams to Wisconsin, which seemed like kind of a surprise, a defensive tackle. And then obviously we lost a couple quarterbacks because of Underwood. Well, the guys we are picking up. So the next, if someone commits today, I would expect it to be Jordan Young. He's kind of a Zeke Berry-alike who was committed to Clemson. Wilt Fong recently protected him to Michigan. He would basically be a 1-for-1 replacement for Ike. Then there's a couple linebackers we've been looking at for a very long time. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, he's IMG's linebacker, ideal modern linebacker for our system. Michigan really loves him. Notre Dame really loves him. It's been kind of a will he, won't he commit to one of those schools for a long time. His brother plays Notre Dame. Sam's gut thinks that Michigan is in the lead, but they're going to have to finish well down the stretch. The other linebacker is Bradley Gompers, a Duke commit, who is kind of a Jimmy Roller type. Rose a lot over the recent season, so he went from nobody, committed to Duke basically to top 100 and started looking around. Penn State-Michigan battle is that one. National types and leading Michigan. Penn State insiders think that they've got that one. There's Travis Moten, who is a 3-star defensive tackle wrestler that we're going to like. Under the radar guy from Louisville, not committed anywhere. And Sam has already crystal balled him, so expected that one to kind of jump in the class quietly to replace Williams. And then there's the 5-star flips. So after they got Underwood, they kind of called around. Now, I should have mentioned Alex Graham is not in that. Alex Graham is a weird one. I'll get to him later. But Derek Meadows is the, he was the receiver, an elite, committed with Underwood to LSU. He's obviously not going to LSU anymore, but he hasn't officially decommitted, I don't think. Notre Dame was after him forever. Then Michigan seemed to be leading. Alabama, they pretty much, everyone just said Alabama came in with more NIL money. So it's kind of a question of will he go there and take the best offer? They also have a 5-star quarterback committed, or will he join Underwood? That one seems kind of 50-50, maybe leaning towards Alabama. There are a couple Alabama crystal balls in for him. And the other guys all seem kind of like flyers. The one that I think we really have a shot at, if Michigan was to make a splash, is DJ Pickett. He is another guy who's committed to LSU, top 5 overall cornerback. Morgan's been on him forever, but it was is Michigan really going to be competitive? Now that the answer is yes, this could be like one of those Keon Sabb situations where just staying on a guy and then finishing strong helps you turn him around. He's in town right now because his family's from Michigan originally, so he's celebrating Thanksgiving with his family in Michigan. Michigan's been all over this one. So DJ Pickett, it would be a great pickup. I mean, top 5 overall player. to add to this class. And the other guys are some dudes that visited. Toby Hastrup and Javian Hilson are high 4-star recruits who, defensive ends, might have been looking around, and Michigan got them on campus from Northwestern, so we'll see if that goes anywhere. And then Zach Sostowski is the number 1 player in Oregon. He's visiting Oregon this week, and everyone expects him to commit there. But Michigan kind of made that one interesting, so if he doesn't commit to Oregon this weekend, that one might be something to watch down the stretch. I think that's my list, except for if anyone knows, because he's in town and everyone seems to know everything about this guy but me, Alex Graham, like a 5-star at the beginning of his class, plays for Cass Tech, tried to go to IMG, didn't go to IMG, been committed to Colorado forever, has kind of fallen down to the 3-star territory, according to services that will do that, and people project him to Michigan, but it's not certain. I have no idea what the story is there.
All right.
My list.
Well, there's your recruiting roundup, guys. We're hopefully Michigan beats Ohio State, but probably not. Goodbye.
I mean, it would be funny, right?
It would be very funny. I'd have to invent a new word that's like a order of magnitude past cackling.
I think
maybe
I would
happen.
I would fill Blue Sky from wall to wall with the word "ha."
Yeah, sure. That's good. All right, we'll see. We won't see you guys next week. This is the last one of the season.
We'll do a live show with Steve.
Oh,
Lorenz
we'll do
on
a
signing
signing day show. That's
yeah.
great. Yep.
So
Okay.
December 4th. That's actually in only a few days. So see you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday, guys.
Let's know what time.
Boris is a mayor and a land surveyor with plans of his own. He hates a Ruska, he hates a vodka bandit from his home. He hates a Ruska, vodka. He never drank a sip